Called Bell Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to associate myself with all of the remarks made by previous speakers. I think it's very, very important that we've been able to have an opportunity to raise these issues as per the petitions that were put down. Now, the coronavirus pandemic has been difficult for everyone, and it's exacerbated just about every single inequality that we already see in society. In my constituency and beyond, thousands have fallen behind on their rent, and whilst the government has heralded schemes that were introduced as a saving grace for renters and others alike, the reality is that they don't go far enough and are far behind what's being offered in countries of similar economic standing in Europe. It's not escaped the public's attention that the government actually introduced help for homeowners by the way of a mortgage holiday, but for renters no such scheme was introduced. Instead, they've been forced to rely on the generosity of landlords to lower their rents for the lockdown period, or insufficient support packages, bearing in mind that for some of these landlords, the rent which they're being paid is their income in itself. This pandemic is unprecedented, so the 3-month eviction ban initially was welcome, but now that we can see that it's not enough, it has to be extended. It was more welcome news today that the government actually announced that businesses will be protected from evictions until the end of the year. But why won't we do the same to protect people's in their homes? A recent report by the Greater London Authority saw that about 500,000 private renters in London are at risk of potential eviction from this Sunday, with approximately 65% of households in Lambeth living in rented accommodation. Now, I worry what this will mean for my constituency, Streatham. The 6-month notice period for evictions on all cases, barring serious incidences, is also welcome, but it's not an overall solution. This is why I support Labour's London Mayor, Sadiq Khan's call to freeze rents in London to help prevent a wave of evictions. Now, you've heard already that the government's promised that it would do whatever it took in this pandemic, but that rings hollow when it's unlikely that the government will devolve powers over to City Hall to be able to support Londoners in this way. It seems that the government has chosen to kick the issue further down the road and has made the issue of mass evictions a post-winter problem, but it simply cannot wait. Job losses and industry closures have resulted in a rising unemployment rate, which will only worsen when the job retention scheme winds down. And many have found themselves delving further into poverty, unable to afford the cost of food and increased utility bills on top of their rent payments. Food banks are overwhelmed. The Trussell Trust, for example, have seen an 81% increase in food bank usage. Those eligible for the job retention scheme have been living on just 80% of their wages, and too many have been forced to make the difficult decisions about which bills to pay. Workers who are unable to be furloughed but have had to self-isolate for health reasons are left to live on £95.85 a week on statutory sick pay, yet the average weekly rent in the UK is £246 a week, and the average weekly food bill is over £100. And this is all before I mention the 3 million people who have been excluded from support packages entirely. Arbitrary cut-off dates, a lack of consideration for more complex payment methods, certain industries, those on parental leave, and a whole range of personal circumstances affecting eligibility has through no fault of their own, left 3 million people excluded from any form of financial support during the pandemic. Without a regular income and adequate financial support to see them through this crisis, people will be forced to burn through their savings, if they have any. And we already know that Shelter has found that 2/3 of renters have used all of their savings during this period. In the worst case scenario, this will leave people unable to buy the basic things they need to survive, and that's why I believe we need an emergency universal basic income now to make sure that the millions who've seen their income slashed can support themselves over the coming months. And we need a plan to make it permanent in the future to address all of the inequalities we see in society. That would be levelling up. Now, the disastrous universal credit scheme is not the answer. Just a mere 10% of those who have been excluded have been able to make a successful claim, from plumbers to dentists, photographers to therapists, barristers to performers. Far too many have been left to slip through the cracks, and the government has stuck its fingers in its ears and refused to listen to them, leaving thousands in dire financial situations. We all know the pandemic is far from over, With winter approaching, we don't know how this will impact the infection rate, if sectors are forced to close, and you know, rumours of another national lockdown. Employers will be forced to let people go. People will be faced with harder decisions, forced to choose between rent, food or heating, all of this in the 6th largest economy in the world. Now, according to the RSA, a universal basic income of just £4,800 per person a year could reduce relative household poverty by up to 33%, which would make a massive difference. I would say that this is a global pandemic. It is completely unprecedented, and it's brought unprecedented problems. We put the support schemes in place, the government put the support schemes in place that they did in March, and you know, they were tried and tested, and we've seen there are not enough. They've merely delayed certain problems. And when the pandemic in the winter brings with it so much uncertainty, the government must intervene. And this is why we really do need that universal basic income as soon as possible. So I commend all of those that put their names to petitions. I've seen such a greater wave than we've ever seen before of people getting involved and you know, lobbying MPs and calling for what they really need in this very, very difficult time. And I hope that it's not something that we'll see in desperate times, but it's something that we'll see moving forward. Thank you very much.